I'm really excited to be able to share with you really like a vision of hope about an ecological civilization. As I say here, it really offers this potential to transform our future. And we all sure know that that future needs to be transformed from where it's heading right now. So, we are going to follow this little honeybee here. And actually start off by taking a journey first, just a little kind of view on the state of the Earth right now. And as you can imagine, it's a bit of a grim story. So you have to bear with me as we look at what we're really doing here. And then we're going to look at different times in history. There's only been a few, but there's actually been a real transformation in the total full experience, what it's like to be human, that we kind of need right now. And then that honeybee is going to take us to the last section where we're going to look at what an ecological civilization actually might mean, and what it could be about, and how that could impact life here on Earth. So, beginning with the kind of state of the Earth, well, this is our home, and as far as we know, for all of our exploration of space, it's still the only place we know in the universe that has life. And of course, just the last couple 100,000 years, humans evolved in our current state, and just the last few thousand years, we've developed a global civilization. And, well, we're doing a pretty crappy job of managing that home of ours with our civilization. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this kind of graph looking at emissions relating to the climate breakdown. And I won't go into all the details, but suffice it to say that we need to bring our emissions down on that green path, way down, to try to keep warming of the Earth no less than 1.5 degrees Celsius, which in itself is close to catastrophic in some places. But we're actually headed more towards that blue path, which is truly, in a way, potentially catastrophic for our entire civilization. And this graph, again, I won't go into the details, but it kind of shows what we're really looking at this century. So if we look at feedback effects, like things like ice sheets melting, permafrost melting, all these kind of things that then impact climate change further, we could easily be looking at these kind of temperature rises by the end of the century, which, as this graph says, could lead to really totally the collapse of modern civilization. But the thing that takes it to an even deeper level, even if by some magical set of circumstances we could find some combination of green energy and taxes on fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff, and actually keep those temperatures to something more manageable, we're still looking at vast ecological destruction across the board. I'll just take you through some of these things. Half of all marine life has been lost in the last 40 years. The rainforests are disappearing everywhere we look, whether it's the Congo Basin in Africa or the Amazon rainforest. This headline came out before Bolsonaro was elected. Of course, we all know what impact that's going to have. And overall, across the world, there's been a 60% decline in animal populations since 1970, and is continuing at an even more rapid pace year by year. There's been an insect collapse. We're just discovering recently across the world. This is in Germany, they discovered a 75% decline of insects. Just the other day, a report from Puerto Rico talked about a 98% disappearance of ground insects in just 30 years. And here in California, we've been losing our monarch butterflies. They're basically at the edge of extinction right now. It just goes on and on and on. And by 2050, it's expected there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish. And the story goes on and on. The UN tells us that we should expect 5 billion people to be facing water shortages by the middle of this century. We're looking at the beginnings of the 6th great extinction of species since Earth began billions of years ago. Only this one, of course, is human-caused. We can expect the virtual total annihilation of coral reefs this century due to the climate destruction. And there's been UN reports telling us that at the current rate of degradation, the topsoil that we use to grow our crops can only support about 60 more harvests unless we transform things around there. So then what kind of blows one's mind is when we realize that all of this is happening at this global production of consumer and economic goods today, which is estimated to be about $92 trillion. And if you look at mainstream economists' expectations for the future, they're looking at a tripling of that total amount of production and consuming the earth by the middle of this century. It's just terrifying. But there are some people who are actually quite happy about the whole story here. And these are people, of course, who are coming up with their new IPOs and taking advantage of this consumption of the earth. We're looking at a system that is basically designed to mint billionaires. And for the rest of life on earth, that is just being consumed into that production of billionaire system. But, you know, there's somebody who can actually describe what's going on way more eloquently than I can. So I'm just going to stand back for a couple of minutes and let her take the floor. And her name is Greta Thunberg.
My name is Greta Thunberg. I am 15 years old and I'm from Sweden. I speak on behalf of Climate Justice Now. Many people say that Sweden is just a small country and it doesn't matter what we do. But I've learned that you are never too small to make a difference. And if a few children can get headlines all over the world just by not going to school, then imagine what we could all do together if we really wanted to. But to do that, we have to speak clearly, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. You only speak of green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular. You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. But I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. Our biosphere is being sacrificed so that rich people in countries like mine can live in luxury. It is the sufferings of the many which pay for the luxuries of the few. The year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything while there still was time to act. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future in front of their very eyes. Until you start focusing on what needs to be done, rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. We need to keep the fossil fuels in the ground, and we need to focus on equity. And if solutions within this system are so impossible to find, then maybe we should change the system itself. We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not. The real power belongs to the people. Thank you.
Just amazing, and people like Greta can give us all hope. But it's not just about hope, it's about what we can do to support that. And, she said, I think so eloquently, if you can't make the fixes within the system, maybe we should change the system itself. And that's what we're looking at in this presentation. And we're talking about not just a few tweaks to a system, or even significant changes to a system. We're talking about a transformation of the way in which all of us as human beings get meaning from our lives and act in a way that is different from the way this current system is working. That's a huge transformation. And it's really only happened about twice in human history since humans first emerged as hunter-gatherers. And I'm going to take us through, just real briefly, a sense of those two transformations to give us a little bit of context of what we're talking about. First, from hunter-gatherers to agriculture. Our ancestors spent about 95% of human history as nomadic hunter-gatherers. And their story of nature, the way they saw the universe, was that nature was a giving power. And from that, a few things naturally kind of arose in terms of how to think about the world and life. All living beings, a family. We all have an intimate relationship with spirits. And we can trust nature to meet our needs. Everything is connected. And the natural world just has intrinsic value. And that's how hunter-gatherers made sense of the world. But all that changed around 10,000 years ago or so, when agriculture emerged. And with that came a separation in human experience. Humans seeing themselves as separate from nature, and just as importantly, humans seeing themselves as separate from other humans. And that led to a different kind of root story of what life was all about for people in agrarian civilizations, which I call the hierarchy of the gods. And the story went something like this, that there's now intrinsic value in things like wealth, possessions, and power. You can't trust the gods like the way the hunter-gatherers did to supply all you need, so you need to worship them and sacrifice, and you need a priesthood to intermediate between you and the higher powers. And above all, respect the hierarchy if you want to get along. And of course, along with that came respect the patriarchy. And that is how humans, increasingly throughout the whole world, experienced life for thousands and thousands of years until just a few hundred years ago, with the rise of the scientific revolution. That had a completely different story about the universe. It said that actually nature is a machine. And since it's a machine, we can figure out how it works. And if we do that, we can conquer nature. And this is some of the words of Francis Bacon, the prophet of the scientific age. He said, we need to establish and extend the power of dominion of the human race itself over the universe, so that we can render ourselves the masters and possessors of nature. And over the last few hundred years, that story has infused basically our whole global civilization. And until now, this is the kind of new emissary of the story, if you will. Every time we turn on the news and see just something like that, they might be talking about stocks that day or what the president's doing, whatever. What they're really telling us is we're all separate from each other. That we're all selfish. And oh, by the way, that's great, because everybody fulfilling their selfish needs as rational maximizers leads to the most efficient allocation of resources and the true working of capitalism. We're told that nature is a machine. And as such, of course, technology offers a solution to everything, to all our problems, even allowing us to somehow grow infinitely on a finite planet. And underlying all that, the story really says that, oh, by the way, everything is meaningless. So just fill it with consumerism. And of course, new generation of people are being trained to do exactly that, like living lives as sort of technology-driven zombies, separate from each other, separate from the production of their food, just connected to those kind of global hypnosis machines. And it's led to the greatest inequality in all of history. As of last year, these 6 men, these billionaires, own as much wealth as half the entire world's population. It's led us to ransacking the earth to get the last minerals out so we can keep consuming it as fast as possible. and it's led to this catastrophic, already, events of climate disruption, climate breakdown. So the question is, can we effect another transformation that we need to something like an ecological civilization? So now let's take a little bit of a look at what that might actually mean. Well, so what is an ecological civilization? It's basically about transforming the basis of our global civilization from one that is wealth-based to one that is life-based. And as such, it's about creating a system, a whole global and cultural economic system that promotes sustainable flourishing for humans and Earth. And it's based on this notion, on the underlying principles and ideas of ecology, which is really the study of how living systems self-organize. And ecologies have this amazing characteristic that they can remain resilient and stable for millions of years. This is the Amazon rainforest, until, of course, that is, human activity is destroying it. But there's a way in which ecologies manage to maintain themselves in a flourishing space indefinitely and sustainably. So what can we learn from that? Well, the ecological civilization story has its own kind of roots story about the universe. It's that we are all interconnected in the web of life. And out of that come certain principles that sort of underlie everything else that I'll just take you through real quickly. One is this principle of respecting the dignity of all people and groups. Like in this watering hole, all the different animals are able to access the resource they need of water. And similarly, it looks at the inherent right of every person to participate in political and economic power. It has a principle of symbiosis, living for the common good. So just like this little bird is picking the bugs out of the crocodile's teeth, in an ecological civilization, each party contributes and receives reciprocally based on their particular needs, based on their particular abilities. There's the principle of holarchy, which is recognizing that every part exists as part of a greater whole, as we see in every ecosystem. And as such, the health of the whole requires the flourishing of each part. You don't have a healthy whole without every part flourishing together. It would look at society being organized in a different kind of way, based on bioregions rather than political or national boundaries. So here's a map of California, and it's broken up in a different way than we're used to seeing, based on the particular regions and the ecologies of those regions, because different regions have different needs based on those ecologies. So communities would be more connected with the land, where people and people around them, where they're living, rather than these global flows of globalized capitalism. It would recognize humanity as being embedded within the natural world. This is a poster that we saw in Paris during COP21 a few years back, which I love. We are not fighting for nature. We are nature, defending itself. We would look at sustainable flourishing into the long-term future. And many of us are familiar with this amazing far-seeing phrase from the Ecological Confederacy. In our every deliberation, we must consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. That's how we need to be looking at how we make our decisions. And finally, the final principle is one of humility, recognizing the unpredictability of all the different complex systems of which we're part. So just like this spider's web, where you can drop one little drop of water in one place, and it reverberates through the entire web in ways you can't necessarily predict. So similarly, we humans need to have the humility to realize that we affect the global system in these nonlinear ways, and tread with reverence in whatever we try to accomplish into the future. So with these principles, what would an ecological civilization really look like in practice. So I can just, obviously, have time to take you through just a touch of some of what that would actually mean in our reality. It would mean a reduction, a huge reduction in this global income inequality. It would mean things like a global wealth tax, some of the things people are talking about already, a universal basic income, property being returned to the commons. It would mean corporations existing for humanity rather than those shareholder returns, fundamentally transforming and restructuring those transnational corporations that currently have a stranglehold over every activity that goes on throughout the entire world. And one aspect of that would be requiring a triple bottom line for all corporate charters. So if a corporation wanted to get rechartered, it would have to have this triple bottom line of not just profit, but also people and planet. And along with it, strict limits on advertising, on that mass hypnosis of consumers that's going on around the world. We'd be looking at a vast rise in worker-owned co-ops, becoming really the major force of global commerce, just like Mondragon that many people know about in Spain. It's a great example of a huge and successful co-op structure. And co-ops just tend to have more values consistent with an ecological civilization. It would mean moving to a circular economy, which offers increased employment while reducing waste, simply through designing products actually for repair and recycling in the actual production system, sourcing from recycled materials, and virtually eliminating waste through that restructuring of how we think about production. It would lead to cities and being designed on ecological principles with community gardens on every block and on rooftops. It would mean using aquaponics within cities, and of course cars being banned from city centers. It would mean really transforming our global agriculture through agroecology based on permaculture principles with much greater crop biodiversity and clearing, which leads to far greater water and carbon efficiency and the virtual elimination of synthetic fertilizer that is slowly killing us all and all other life. And we'd be measuring this civilization in a different way. Rather than this gross domestic product that we were looking at before, we'll be replacing that and there's many indicators. There's one out there already called the Genuine Progress Indicator, which looks at how a country is doing. And from the GDP, it reduces it with negatives like inequality, pollution, and crime, and then increases it for positives that are not captured on GDP, like volunteer work, household work, education. And it would mean a UN legally binding rights of nature that puts the natural world on the same legal standing as humanity, giving personhood to ecosystems and to high-functioning mammals, and to define ecocide as a crime that could be prosecuted at the International Criminal Court. And there are some activities going on right now to try to make some of these ideas into a reality. So, everything that I've been describing seems like a long way away from the core values of our current civilization. And it is. And just to make the challenge even greater, those last transformations we looked at happened over thousands of years, or even hundreds of years, and we just have a few decades. And those other transformations kind of self-organized. It wasn't like somebody said, we need to start a scientific revolution, other than maybe Francis Bacon to some degree, but for the most part, it just happened, and it naturally transformed. In this case, we need to consciously change our values and behavior. And we have just a short time to do it. If we accomplish this, it would represent really a unique achievement in all of human history. And if we look at this timeline, well, we can see ourselves maybe right now somewhere in the middle of this kind of early adoption phase, and that has to transform into a completely transformed way of thinking in society before too long, before it's widespread acceptance. But the hopeful thing is that has happened in the world. We see that happening in other areas of social change. And so social change in society in general does happen in a non-linear way. Now, I'm not saying it's likely that this is actually going to happen, But I'm saying it's possible. Even if it's a long shot, it's possible if enough of us get behind this and work together to lead into that tipping point. And one thing I know for sure is that we owe it to Greta and to her generation to give it everything we've got to make that happen.